afternoon. I'm Bev Juday, and I'm from the Wild Rivers Film Festival. We're here to welcome you this afternoon to the Film Festival Radio, the official podcast of the Wild Rivers Film Festival on KCIW 100.7 FM. Today I'd like to give a sponsor shout-out before we get started and thank the Wild Rivers Film Festival presenting sponsor for 2024, KDRV Newswatch 12 out of Medford, Oregon. Thank you so much for making this summer's festival a success. This year, the Wild Rivers Film Festival was brought to you in part by the Tolowa Dee Nation, Oregon Community Foundation, the Ford Family Foundation, Travel Curry Coast, the Roundhouse Foundation, and the City of Brookings. If you're interested in sponsoring the Wild Rivers Film Festival and our mission to celebrate indie cinema on the Wild Rivers Coast, you can learn more on our website, wildriversfilmfestival.com. I am with filmmaker Tim Rendell. Tim's film is B-Cats, and this is a very interesting film. I'm going to let Tim fill us in on all of it. But Tim is also our new city manager, so welcome, Tim.
Well, thank you, Bev. I appreciate you being here, letting me participate in this today. Yeah, I'm very excited about the Film Fest and very excited about being a resident here in Brookings now as well.
Well, we're excited you're here. So tell me a little bit about your film, because this has a really interesting background.
Yeah, well, I managed a city from 2016 to 2019, a little over 3 years in Durant, Oklahoma. I'm actually an Okie. So I was born in Arkansas, but raised primarily in Oklahoma. That's where I went to college and grad school. And so when I got to Durant, which is down right on the Texas border in southeast Oklahoma,
okay,
I immediately saw all these people driving around the community and riding lawnmowers. And it looked like they were not there to mow lawns. They were there. We see somebody wearing a dress and other things. You're like, okay, she's wearing a dress. I don't think she's really going out. So I asked my police chief, I said, what is up? And probably in Durant's a town of about 20,000 people.
Okay.
And probably in that town alone, I saw probably 15, 20 people riding around in these lawnmowers. And so I asked my police chief, I said, how are they able to drive these lawnmowers legally on the street? And he said, well, because in Oklahoma and a lot of other states, lawnmowers and landscaping equipment is considered agriculture equipment, and they're allowed to drive those on the street as long as they still have the blade attached, and which it doesn't have to be engaged while they're driving, but as long as it has an actual blade. So I guess the word got out, and some of these folks started riding lawnmowers as their main mode of transportation. So I focused heavily there in Durant, and then I went to another town in Bennington. I started the documentary back in about 2019, about 5 years ago is when I kind of started it. And so anyway, the documentary itself, it's about 25 minutes, and it's primarily, it kind of goes through the lives of 3-4 different people that use riding lawnmowers as their main mode of transportation, and it kind of follows them around and asks, why are you doing this? How did you get here? Those type of things. And it's some interesting dynamics, because anybody that drives a riding lawnmower as their main mode of transportation is going to be an interesting character. And all these guys were just incredible characters.
I love it. I can imagine some of the things they told you.
Oh, yeah. I like I said, I'll save it for anybody who wants to go watch it. But there's one individual named Terry. And Terry, we just actually stumbled upon because we were getting ready to leave Bennington, and somebody said, hey, did you guys go talk to Terry yet? And we're like, who's Terry? And we went and met him. And he, in the documentary world, produced what we call documentary gold because of he interviewed well. He's got a great sense of humor. And like I said, it was just an interesting guy to talk to. But as I was saying earlier, once you start getting to know them and know about their story and how they got to where they're at and why they're using riding lawnmowers, I think, for me, at the beginning, I was just going to do a little cute documentary about, people using lawnmowers to run their errands and go do their grocery shopping and everything else. But as I kind of delved into it a little bit deeper, I found a little bit more meaning to what the documentary should be focused on. And all seriousness aside, they have areas in Oklahoma, and I'm sure Oregon has them too, and I know California does, in rural areas where there is no public transit. So we kind of delve into that as well. I mean, Oklahoma ranks toward the bottom of the nation in public transit.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Well, because it's very rural, low taxes, which often means low services available. And I think that's kind of, so the cities that I've managed two cities in California, Auburn and a little town called Weed, California, which is up by Mount Shasta, and everybody pretty much knows where Weed's at if you've ever driven down I-5. And those communities Auburn had, the city owned a public transit system. In Weed, we had the Siskiyou Transit, which ran all over the county, and they had, dial-a-rides and those type of things too. So, but that just really wasn't available to the folks down where I was at, and it was very evident that was one of the other reasons why they had to use lawnmowers to get around. So, but yeah, some interesting folks. But it was about my fourth documentary that I've either produced or directed in the past 10 years. So it was good though. I do this just, being a city manager is my number one priority. That's right. my job. I think every city manager should have a hobby, and my hobby is producing and directing documentary films. And the great thing about those, Bev, is the fact that you don't have to. Everything doesn't have to be on a real time crunch. The last two that I've directed and produced myself took 3-4 years to get all the material, and because things happen in life where you are more focused towards your career and stuff.
Exactly.
And this kind of takes the back seat. So, everybody asks me, it's like, do you make any money making documentary films? And the answer is no. You actually, like a lot of artists, you end up spending a lot of money. I had one film a while back that was on Amazon, Google Play, iTunes. I got a distributor that picked it up. It was called Brother Valentine. It was another documentary that I produced and directed, and I got picked up by a distributor. And so it was kind of nice. I started picking up some of the, recouping some of the cost of doing it. So, but, I tell my kids, I have two boys, and I tell my sons, I said, someday, if you play your cards right, you'll be getting those royalties for about $2.80 a month by then. So,
I love it.
So anyway, they got a big chuckle. I said, "Well, you're going to leave us something behind, Dad." I was like, "Yeah, it's not going to be no." But anyway, it's an art. I look at it as an art. Filmmaking as an art, and definitely doing documentary films is an art as well. So, and because nothing is scripted, you're just going out. You have a list of questions, kind of like what you're doing with me right now. List of questions, you ask, you listen, you follow up, and then every once in a while you hit a little nugget there, and then you start delving into it a little bit deeper, and that's the fun part about being a documentary filmmaker as well.
I'm Bev Jude, and I'm from the Wild Rivers Film Festival. Are you new to the film festival? If this is the first that you're hearing about us, we're so glad you're joining us today. The Wild Rivers Film Festival is a celebration of indie and local cinema that happens during the third week of every August in Brookings. Over the course of 4 days, we screen more than 4 dozen films at 3 locations across the city. Many of our film screenings feature Q&A sessions from the visiting filmmakers, and our festival includes daily education panels, VIP parties, and a not-to-be-missed awards ceremony on the final day of the fest. Festival passes are on sale all year at thewildriversfilmfestival.com, and we can't wait to see you at our next festival. I happen to like documentaries myself. I think it's fascinating how they discover those hidden gems, like you mentioned, like just with your film. You started out just kind of curious, and it was almost comedic that these folks are riding around on lawnmowers.
Yeah.
And then you found a deeper problem.
The two films that my last ones were both like that. I knew there was a story there. The Brother Valentine is a much more serious documentary that I produced and directed. It was actually about a murder in a small town in the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
In a little town in Oklahoma, and started kind of delving into it, talking to a lot of family, talking to a lot of friends and neighbors that were there when at the time of the murder. But I wasn't really sure where this was going to go. Mm-hmm. And then one night it just goes, the light bulb came on, and I said, this is exactly where this film needs to go. And it's had a lot more deeper meaning to a lot of folks once they watched the film, because it involved a minor who was the actual person that, mm-hmm. committed the homicide. And so it opened up a whole new realm of questions, and then going out and talking to other folks and in the mental health field and those type of things too, about red flags and those things that you might not see. And of course, back in the 1970s, I talked to the mother of the young man that committed the homicide, and I asked her, I said, why didn't anything get done? And she said, well, this was like 1974. There was no, crisis intervention or thing like that. She said there wasn't much counseling, psychiatric stuff going on for kids back then. And so anyway, but it opened it up to, so not to bring it on to a down note, but I think documentary films can be real quirky and funny, but they can also have, like you said, a deeper message. And I've watched hundreds of documentary films. I've seen really good ones. I've seen some really bad ones.
Sure.
And I think though that once you see the basis of the story, it usually goes off into another realm. So, but this one here, like I say, it was lighthearted, and it didn't get like super, deep like the Brother Valentine did, but it did. It questioned quite a bit as to why we would allow people to use riding lawnmowers to drive around and go to their doctor's appointments, get their groceries, and all those things without any public transit available. It's actually, it's kind of a sad statement on certain areas too, and the deeper need for, like I said before, public transit. So
sure. And a lot of times problems, because we see them and they aren't instantly as big as they might be down the road. You ease into them, it's your blind spot. It is. And most communities see that. And,
for example, with COVID, COVID opened the eyes, not getting into all the vaccinations and the deaths, and it was a horrible time for our country. But we also got our eyes opened with the homelessness issues and the unhoused. And so that was something that, in Siskiyou County, my first day on the job in Weed was the day the governor shut the state down for COVID. First day on the job. But it also showed a tremendous need, because we had all these folks that had no homes. And in Wairika, the city owned some acreage across from their Department of Human Services. And an encampment started. And a lot of people were very upset about that encampment, because, I don't know, I'd estimate 50 to 100 people lived up on this hill.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were there for the majority until recently. I think they just now ordered the encampment to be taken down for 4 years. That's what some of these people called home. And it put a big impact on the city of Wairika, Siskiyou County, and some other folks. And a lot of people were very upset and irritated by it. But you have to also understand, at the beginning of the COVID, a lot of the homeless had nowhere to go, and people were shutting the doors on. If you remember, everything was getting shut down.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so these folks had nowhere to go for help, nowhere to go for housing, and it just kind of, like I said, like you just said earlier, it's something when you have an issue pop up that you really don't see something that significant happening, but as time goes on, it was a huge ordeal. I love the Bay Area. I go down there quite a bit, and it was kind of sad seeing. I love San Francisco, but it's kind of sad seeing all the encampments all around downtown San Francisco, and what it did is it kind of drove a lot of the tourists away, and some other folks, because they didn't want to get down there. And I kind of understand. I went down there a couple of times, and I kind of understand why people would be a little hesitant about, staying in a nice hotel right across the street from a homeless encampment, because you just never know what's going to happen. So,
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think many rural communities experienced what you just described.
Yes.
It started off small, homeless may have even been somewhat invisible.
Yeah.
But by the end of COVID, it
Well,
was not.
And what's interesting, Bev, is when people statistically look at homeless in their community, most cities and counties, they do these homeless like census counts. And what we found out, even in Weed and some of these other places I've managed, is a majority of these people are not just people that landed in your town. These are people that grew up there, went to high school there, and this is their home, but they just have nowhere to live. And, I understand the reasoning why a lot of these folks are where they're at. A lot of it has to do with two things. It's either addiction or mental health issues, or a combination of both. It's usually a combination of both. People self-medicating for their psychiatric issues, and then having, then developing a serious addiction problem that didn't help their psychiatric problems, but only made them much worse. And so it's just a sad cycle. But if you actually look at a lot of the homeless in throughout the country, a lot of these folks grew right up there. Here in Brookings, I'm not going to name names, but I noticed a few folks that were constantly, you'd see them, and I asked, my police chief, and he goes, "Oh yeah, that guy grew up here, that guy grew up here." And it puts a lot of strain and stress on, local communities as well. But those are the type of things as a city manager we deal with all the time too. It's not just, sewer lines, water lines,
right.
Those type of things, but it also has to deal with, a lot of the social issues that, we're kind of forced into. Unfortunately, our police departments, basically a lot of their time and effort is crisis management and dealing with a lot of the homelessness, the homeless that have, like I said, they're either acting out based on some serious psychiatric issues going on at the time, or with drug issues. So
sure,
yep.
Yeah. So definitely some serious issues, and I'm sure you see them all as city manager. Do you have anything else in the works? I mean, that's possibly a future documentary for you right there.
Yeah, I have a few things I'm considering doing some documentaries. I think I'm going to try to stay a little bit more lighthearted again.
Right.
But yeah, so there's some even around here, just some of the industry and some of the things here. Mm-hmm. And like I say, again, just some of the characters that I'm sure I'm going to run into here as well. But, just going out and trying to tell a story. Mm-hmm. And that's what I always tell people. A documentary filmmaker is nothing more than an artist that loves to tell stories about certain things. And like I said, I've been doing this about 12 years now. And my first documentary I started was in 2012. I did a really little micro short about a elderly gentleman that was my ex's grandfather. And he was an over-the-road truck driver, like long-distance truck driver.
Okay.
And the title of it's called "Thanks for the Buggy Ride," and it was a very, it was something that just happened real quickly. So it wasn't really, not my best work, I would say, but it's just the first time I ever even tried documentary filmmaking. But yeah, he was I think right around 90.
Wow.
And we were all going out to dinner, and a big truck came by and passed us, and he goes, "Boy, wouldn't I, love to just take one more ride before I go." And so I had a friend whose husband was a truck driver. And so for his birthday, we surprised him, and we took him out and took him on a ride, his last ride.
Very
because he ended up going into an Alzheimer's unit shortly after that. But yeah, it was probably about an hour and a half round trip. We even stopped at an old greasy spoon diner so you could hang out with,
get the full experience.
Exactly.
Right?
Eat some bad food with some truckers. And so yeah, he was just elated. And it was really neat just watching him light up and ask, I sat in the back of the cab, And he and the driver sat up in the front, and he was asking him all these questions about all these fancy gauges and things they have on these trucks now compared to when he drove a truck back in World War II. So yeah, a big difference in the technology and the things that are going on with trucking. So anyway, that was my first shot at it. But there's always I don't have anything like say set in stone at this point, but there may be something that I may want to look into a little bit deeper as I get to know the community a little bit better. But like I said, a lot of these things are that I've produced and directed are very lighthearted. I've had one film back in 2015, which was premiered at South by Southwest.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's
which is
cool.
about the second behind Sundance, probably about the second largest film fest.
Absolutely.
Along with all the music and other things. If you've never been to Austin, I tell everybody to go because it's a really cool town. So anyway, I had a film that I produced that was premiered there, so that was fun. And it was a lighthearted. Real quick, I'll just tell you real quickly about it. It was a film about these high school boys that back in the early 80s used to make prank phone calls.
Oh.
And if you remember, Bev, every town had what was like a thrifty nickel or a penny saver. Those little free
Sure.
and you pay like $5. You can put an ad in there. And what these boys would do is they would take the thrifty nickel and they would look through and see things that were for sale. And one of their buddies had a really deep voice. He's like 16, but he sounded like an adult. And they would just get the tape recorder out and record these calls. Yeah. And they were hilarious because they were just asking. The calls would always start real, matter of fact, how much do you want for it? Da, da, da. And then they would just go off and, way out into left field. And it would really catch some of these people, off guard.
Before they realized it was a prank.
Yeah. Some of them never even realized it was a prank. They just thought some weird guy called them about. One lady had what was those little precious moments? You remember those little figurines?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, she had a figurine that was like shaped like a goose or something, and she wanted like $30 for this. And this guy called, and the call went south in a hurry. But this is the funniest part is they went back to their hometown and found some of the people that they pranked like 40 years ago.
Oh,
like the lady with the little.
Terrific.
It was awesome. The lady with the little goose thing. They interviewed her, and she remembered. She goes, "I do remember that call. It was bizarre." And then they asked her, "Did you ever sell the goose?" And she said, "No, he's sitting right up there." It's 40 years later, she still has the goose she was trying to sell on the thrifty nickel. But it's just like I say, a very lighthearted way of looking at some of the, back then. I told my kids I'm guilty of making some prank phone calls myself as a child. Oh, yeah. I said, the great thing about it is we didn't have caller ID, so nobody knew who you were. So we would just, call businesses and act silly and do silly things. So, but yeah, so that was one look at it. Then back in 2013, or 12, I started working on Brother Valentine. And that took about 3 years. And that did really well. That film did. That's probably one of my best films. And like I said, being picked up by a distributor as well as making festivals all over the world. I think a couple in Europe and some other places as well. So, but yeah, those are the kind of things that you do as an artist. And I wish I had other skills, but the best I can do is going out and telling stories. That's what I really enjoy doing. So
I think that's fantastic. And you're a perfect fit for the Wild Rivers Film Festival.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here. When will your documentary be shown?
I believe it's today at 4:30. I believe at the Chetco or the library. I forgot. I have to look. It's one of those.
It's the library.
It's the library at the library at 4:30 today. Yeah, and so 4:30. If you want to come out and support the arts and see a silly little film about people driving all over and riding lawnmowers, it'll like I said, you'll get some good laughs out of it. I'll tell you that.
So is this film on the circuit, so to speak, with other film festivals?
Yeah. It's already. I've only submitted it to a certain few festivals. I'm trying to stay close to this area, Oregon, California, Washington. But it's been shown at a couple film fests in Oklahoma.
Okay.
and done quite well there because Okies, support it.
Yeah, they recognize themselves.
They all probably have an uncle or a cousin that uses a lawnmower to get around. Oh yeah, I know these guys. So, but yeah, so that will probably be for the next 2 or 3 months. I'll still be on the, it's submitted to, I don't know, probably about a dozen more festivals.
Fantastic.
But, so I tell my friends, so it's going to be, I was like, no, submission is a lot different than screening. And being selected, I said, that's a big difference. And okay. So, but yeah, so hopefully maybe a couple more festivals here in Oregon and maybe a couple in California that might make it. So yeah, that's probably for the next 2 or 3 months. And then afterwards, like I did with Brother Valentine, I'll just post it so people can watch it, enjoy it. And then
that's fun.
After it's off the circuit, I don't like putting it out because then it kind of takes the mystique away from drawing people in to come watch the film.
Absolutely.
If it's already available on YouTube or whatever.
So how do you, it sounds like you do it all yourself, a true indie film guy. How do you find the time to shoot a documentary when you're managing the city?
Well, that's a great question. It's usually taking time off work, vacations, and so forth. But that's generally, and then editing, generally at night. I have a couple of different editors that I work with that are really, really good at what they do. I do some editing, but because I work a full-time job, I'm not an expert in Premiere or any of the other ones or Final Cut. I wish I was. I probably could be if I would take the time. That's one of the things once I retire, I'd like to delve a lot deeper into it. But generally what I'll do is I can shoot, do the sound, and then the crazy thing about documentary films is when you get done, unlike when you're shooting a screenplay, is you have hours and hours and hours of interviews and B-roll and trying to figure out what is very difficult. And a lot of the film fests, most of them, the cutoff is 40 minutes, but a lot of them don't want them that long. So I try to keep mine between 25 and 30 at the max. So
that makes good sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you ever thought about just going after a short versus a documentary?
Yeah, I've written a couple of shorts. And I've considered doing that too. It's a lot easier to do, and probably a lot less on the editing side as well. So yeah, I've written 2, 3, 4 different shorts.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I've never just produced or directed any.
Haven't gone there.
No, but I have a couple that I'd really like to see come to life someday. So.
Fantastic. Yep. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. I can't wait to see your film. It's called BCATS, right?
BCATS, which is short for the Bryan County Alternative Transportation Society.
Excellent.
So thank you, Bev, for having me here today.
Well, that's it for this episode of Wild Rivers Film Radio. If you want to learn more about the festival, buy passes, volunteer for us, or even sign up for a sponsorship, you can learn more and get connected at thewildriversfilmfestival.com. You can also find the festival on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you, Tom and KCIW, for providing the radio station for this event for us. And thank you, Kat Liddell, for all your edits. We appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.